Okay, we're back with another episode of Gain. This is the Generative AI News Rundown. We do this every Thursday. We used to do it at 12 noon Eastern Time. We've moved it up to 11 a.m. That seems to work better with a lot of people's schedules. And the key thing, though, is that we bring you the news every week. So generative AI is the hottest tech topic around. Synthedia, the daily newsletter around generative AI, and VoiceBot.ai, we've been covering generative AI since 2017, AI news and research since 2016. And this is an opportunity for us to give you a quick digest of what's going on. Also, maybe provide a little bit of additional context around those stories that you may have seen, or maybe there's been new developments. And sometimes that happens after we publish the report. And I'm Brett Kinsella, the founder of VoiceBot and Synthedia, and Eric Schwartz, head writer at VoiceBot.ai, is joining me again this week. Hey, Eric.
Hey, excited to keep bringing all the big news.
Yeah, it's exactly. All right. So just give people a quick summary of what we have coming up today. We've got a lot of data, actually. We're going to talk a little bit about generative search. You know about these: BingChat, Perplexity, Google SGE. We did some analysis. I want to bring that to you and identify maybe a problem that Bing might have. We're going to talk about some market data. There's a lot of data that's coming out now, which maybe puts a little bit of evidence around all the enthusiasm behind generative AI. We've got a ton of stories around funding rounds. I don't even know if we'll get to all of them today, but a lot of people raised money. They wanted to probably get those releases out, the news out before the end of Q2 to let people know that this has happened. So we're going to go through a number of those. We're also going to talk about some new products or some existing products that have added generative AI, and a whole lot more. We've even got winners and losers at the end. We've got some brands. We've got some culture. So that's what we do every week here. And Eric, I think we should probably just get right into it with our first story. All right. So one of the things we were looking at was generative search. And we've talked about that a lot on the Gain Show. Oh, by the way, if you're in the audience, drop a comment. Let us know you are here. And feel free to jump in and make comments, ask questions, those types of things. But definitely, if you're in the audience, try to let us know you're here. Okay. So if you've been using any of these generative search engines, what you might notice is they provide you with a much better search experience because they give you the answers and some context, but they also give you links, so you don't have to do all of the work on your own in order to find everything. But one of the things that we'd noticed using BingChat is that, boy, it takes a long time to generate a result. And it's faster, it's longer than some of the GPT models as well. And so we did some testing and we compared it to Perplexity AI and Google SGE. That's the new Google version of this. It's just part of Google, but it's giving you answers at the top, kind of like the old answer boxes. But in any event, what we found was when we looked at this a couple of weeks ago, BingChat was on an average about 25 seconds to return something. And interestingly enough, when we tested a week later, it had gone down to 13 seconds. Now, I don't see them getting to 6 or 7 seconds. I'll tell you why in a little bit. But it's a lot more acceptable than 25 seconds to get your response, but still really long, particularly compared to Perplexity and Google. And Perplexity actually might be a little bit faster than this. I think some of this had to do with the types of questions we were asking, but it's comparable. It's in the range of this 4 to 5 second range that Google is doing. One of the things we did not do is we really didn't focus on quality, but we did also look at the number of words that were generated and looking at words generated per minute. And so what you can see here is that Perplexity by far had generated the most words. And so it had the most context. We didn't really look at quality. But I would, in general, I would say that the quality there was probably a little bit higher. Google was pretty good. This is actually more words than Google SGE was producing a few weeks ago. But look at that. BingChat takes the longest, but generates the fewest words. And what you can see is one of the ways maybe they got a little bit of speed improvement was generating fewer words. Mostly it looks like they probably did something at inference in order to speed up the process. But in terms of words per second, you're looking at pretty comparable Perplexity AI, Google SGE, and Bing is way behind. And so the key thing that I really want to bring up here is that BingChat, really innovative, really showed people what generative search could be. Came out really early. In fact, it was actually about a month behind this version of Perplexity, which is very good. However, they've got a couple of barriers. One is, well, you can use it in their mobile app, the Bing mobile app now, right now, but you have to use on the desktop, you have to use Edge browser. So that's one barrier to get people try it. But now they have this other barrier that once people try it, is this going to be that great of an experience? And I'm wondering how much market share they can really take if the quality is not measurably higher, but the production of words and information is lower, and it takes 3 to 4 times longer to get an answer.
Yeah, I think as you said, there's a few different dimensions to it, but I think that any of these generative AI chatbots that want to compete has to think about speed and quality. And I think at this point, people are pretty used to search engines having a pretty high baseline for what the quality of what they bring back. So I think speed is going to be important there. And I think it's also notable that speaking of links, I mean, Perplexity, that's a major selling point for them, is that they don't just give you the answer, they show you where they're getting it from. So I think there's that also to consider. But I don't know. I don't know if Google is, as you said, I don't know if Google's going to be able to get too much lower, but it's the fact that it dropped so precipitously in just a week means that they're definitely not. It's definitely not a finished product.
You're talking about Bing, not Google. You're talking about BingChat.
Oh, sorry, yeah, Bing. Sorry, not. Yeah, I was saying, yeah, Microsoft. I don't think they're done with it. I think that they're trying to maintain their lead in terms of how quickly they get their products out and how fast they can be in offering either new things or better things. And I think that that's going to be the story for a while to come. Bing coming out with better and faster services than its rivals.
Yep, got it. So we don't have to go into that too much in too much more depth, but I just wanted to let people know that I think this is something to look at. At first, we were looking at the experience, and then we were looking at quality, and then we were looking at source links and the quality of those. We were looking at the conversational features and those types of things. But latency is a really big deal. And a lot of people don't know this, but when Google first came out, it was just this blank screen, kind of like what you have today. And that was a big contrast to what we had with Yahoo and Alta Vista and Excite and all these other browsers that were the dominant players at the time, because they had all sorts of information. It was like this portal concept of like news. And Google just had this clean screen. It's just like a little box, you enter in information. So a lot of people think about Google won the war there, the search wars, because of quality. And that was a big part of it. PageRank system was really important, but it was also the total time was very important to them. And what they thought of is this idea from when you have a thought to you get an answer. And so that included page load time. And this was back at a time when not everybody had like ubiquitous bandwidth and things like that. So it might take many seconds just to load the Yahoo page or the Alta Vista page before you could actually enter the search and then get the result. And Google turned out to be much faster on both ranks. So you think so I think that's, Google set that standard. I think when we go into conversational search, because the quality is much better, people are okay with waiting a little bit longer. It doesn't need to be 100 milliseconds, 4 or 5 seconds. But when you're waiting, certainly 25 seconds is way too long. But even waiting 10 seconds seems like a long time, particularly when you have some alternatives. And Bing is trying to steal share from Google as opposed to protect share, and so they need to be that much better on every metric.
Yeah, and there are other factors that are probably on the margins, but we've discussed the experience of trying to interact with a generative AI chatbot as though it's a human seeing it, quote unquote, type, as opposed to just waiting for it to finish what it's generating and put it all out at once.
Okay, so that's great. Let's move on to the next story. I understand a few people on LinkedIn, for some reason, LinkedIn's not working for the live stream today, but hopefully people have moved over to YouTube. Let us know you're here. And excited to have people, comment and add to what we're talking about today. Next story. I talked about this a little bit at the Synthedia 3 conference, which we just had this week. And that was what we call the Generative AI Innovation Showcase. We had Perplexity on there. By the way, Ervin Srinivas did an amazing discussion. So we'll have some videos up on that in the next week. So definitely, subscribe to the YouTube channel. But I also want to talk about just very briefly something that we mentioned at that event, but I think is really relevant for everybody if you didn't make it or just want to get a couple additional points. One is, this is the projected revenue for the generative AI industry. This is Bloomberg Intelligence and some IDC data as well factored in here. But basically, it says the generative AI industry generated $40 billion in revenue last year, and it's going to grow to 1.3 trillion by 2032. So that's a 10-year growth of I think it's something like 42% compound annual growth rate to 1.3 trillion. So that's a big number. And you can also see that it's going from less than 1% of total IT spend to over 12% in that period of time. Now, that's really interesting, but it's kind of abstract to sort of think about that. One of the things I really liked is it broke down this idea of sort of the hardware layer when you're doing training, which is training the models in like the cloud and on hard iron, and then inference, which is that's the runtime. And what you can see is the training is 85% last year of all of the revenue for the industry. It's like they're spending money on hardware, on compute cycles, those types of things. And then inference, like people are starting to use this, but they haven't used it that much, right? And training is also just so compute intensive versus inference. And then if you look at the software and then other is like other type of services, could be online services, could be human services as well, but it's less than 5% basically. So over time, that mix is going to change. And you can see that the training goes way down in 5 years. You know, it goes from 85% to 35% of the market. And really what's taking up this is the application layer. And that's what we talk about a lot here today is like how people are using it. They use it at the application layer. But that and other services are going to really pick that up. And to the point that they're going to be about 51% of the market in 2032. And then inference is going to start, you know, that's the operation of the AI models is going to stay relatively low. And then the last point here is, but even though it looks like training is going down, it's still by far the biggest in terms of dollar value when we get out to 2032. They're saying that's going to grow from a $34 billion market last year to a $473 billion market. And this is huge, right? And if you look at that software market, you know, where it's, you know, just, you know, 1.5 billion right now, it's going to go up to 280 billion. These are really giant markets. And let's say the forecast was off significantly. If you just like have all these numbers, those are still giant markets. Those are still really important. And it looks like based on the trajectory so far that these numbers are probably closer to being right. And so if you're in this market or you're wondering like what the secular trends are, they look very favorable across the board.
Yeah, and I think that, as you're saying, even though the shares may change, the overall market is going to grow so big. I mean, there's a reason that people are talking about NVIDIA as this invincible super company now that's going to
exactly.
be, and you know, they're not resting on their laurels. I mean, they're a huge part of the biggest segment now, and they're already doing everything they can to be a huge part of all the other segments going forward. So yeah, that's going to be important.
Yeah, NVIDIA is important. So if you think about all that hardware layer, NVIDIA is a big part of that because they sell the most popular GPU for these types of things. Google has a play in there with the TPUs as well. There's some other players that will come in. NVIDIA is also doing some cloud hosting. They also have the software layer. So NVIDIA is going to be big. Hey, Bart Bailey, thanks for joining us. How do y'all? I've been watching the replays for a month, and I thought I should see it live. Thanks for coming. Yeah, jump in, make comments. Happy to have you here, and hopefully LinkedIn will be working too pretty soon because I know a lot of people prefer that. But you can always shift over to YouTube. All right, so next story, we have one more with market data that we wanted to talk about, and that is a new CNBC poll. And they have what's called a technology council. And these are technology leaders, but these are not leaders in the technology industry. It's all the other industries that have technology executives like CIOs and CTOs. And what they have this whole council, it's a big panel, and they ask them, so what's important to you? Well, AI is now the top spending priority. This is not what it was last year. Last year at this time, it was cost pressure. So cost cutting was sort of the big thing. Sort of see that in here. And so that's been really important. Cybersecurity is also very important. But, you know, the key thing here is we saw all of this interest in generative AI, the hype, right? but we always look to see, does the hype translate into real action, into change in sentiment? And it looks like from this that if you're putting it as your top spending priority, and it sort of justifies all these anecdotal conversations that we're having where people are saying, yeah, I'm doing projects now.
Yeah, I think I suspect that 47% may be what their specific survey got, but I would bet if you're able to survey everyone, it would be higher and probably growing pretty quickly at this point, since every week it seems another major enterprise brand comes out with its own toolkit for generative AI.
Absolutely. Okay, so everybody as well, what I'd like you to do is, if you're on YouTube, give us a like, subscribe to the channel. That'd be super for you to do. I had one more thing I wanted to share. This is not market data, but it's something you can watch right after this. And that is, I need to bring it up. Didn't come up yet. Testing generative AI applications, how to reduce risk and drive user adoption. That is actually right after Gain. It's going to be at noon Eastern time, but you can also watch it afterwards. I think people are going to really like this. So Applause is the largest testing organization in the world for technology applications. And they have 15,000 people that have been testing a bunch of these generative AI applications. And so they asked me to actually join them. So I'll be part of it. I'm going to be I'm talking about some things that you haven't seen before. It's going to be net new to the world in terms of how the different ecosystems are playing out around large language models. But more important than that is they're talking about some of the things that they've learned from testing a lot of these large language models in production for companies, the big companies that are putting that out there, but also how testing is different and how you have to think about testing in a different way. And so I think people really like that. I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that was there. I think I can, here what I'll do is in the chat, I will put a link so that people can see it. I have a bit.ly link here. So that should be in the chat. You guys can see it on the screen here. And I hope it changes. I hope people join so they can see how everything is changing in that testing space. All right, so let's move on to, what do we call it? The funding fountain, the money fountain. Right. So this is our new segment that we're trying to do every week, just because we have so many funding rounds on, and we have a lot this week that we want to get through. And we'll want to talk about just a couple. The first one I wanted to ask you about, Eric, was MosaicML. They were just acquired by Databricks for $1.3 billion.
Yeah, it's a lot of money, especially in the context of the company itself, which is relatively young, relatively small generative AI startup. But Databricks, which is a gigantic company doing data storage, analytics, and other things like that. I mean, they're basically in possession of the materials that generative AI needs to perform at its best. And MosaicML has the models, the algorithms that can really bring that data to life, make it dance, as it were. And so there's basically showing Databricks being very bullish about the industry as a whole. So they're picking them up, and Mosaic's been growing pretty quickly, building open source models specifically. They built a 7 billion parameter model that was getting a lot of attention, and then right ahead of the acquisition came out with a 30 billion parameter model. So very increasingly powerful large language models, and a lot of opportunity for Databricks to bring its enterprise customers a lot of new generative AI tools that combine what it already does with these models that Mosaic's been building.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the key thing here is, like, so you have to step back and say, okay, hey, this is great. A company founded in 2020, 3 years later, has a $1.3 billion exit, right? So that might tell you there's a lot going on in this market. But you're like, why is it that valuable, right? And if you look at Databricks, it's like your data company, and it was like, you look at AI, you're like, okay, that's an operational software, right? So how does that work? Well, what we just saw in all that data points from Bloomberg is that training requires a lot of data, inference requires a lot of the generation of data. And so I'm sure Databricks is looking at this and saying their total addressable market is just exploding because all their clients, if they start using these generative AI on top of all the other data they're managing, they're just going to produce more data. They need more data management solutions. And MosaicML is like, very popular. They've got all these tools and all these other types of things. They've got a couple models. It wasn't obvious to me that was the place they would go for this. But they're, given the previous funding rounds, probably one of the most affordable in the space if you want to get in and build your own.
Yeah, and that was very much the sort of central to what Mosaic was doing there. Part of their stated goals is to bring down the cost, to make building these foundational models, to make building tools from those models cheaper and faster, and they've been doing that. And so now Databricks can say to its customers, we've been doing all this stuff with your data. Now we can do so much more, but don't worry, it's not going to be an exorbitant extra cost. It's going to be relatively small compared to what it could potentially bring you.
Okay. That's enough on Mosaic and Databricks. Here's another one. Calypso AI raised $23 million, which seems like kind of smaller than $1.3 billion, but also a much earlier stage company. And I thought there were a couple of interesting things here. First was, when you look at Calypso, they were really talking about AI security about a year ago, and they weren't talking about generative really at that point. And really a little bit more government and some financial services oriented. Earlier this year, just a few weeks ago, actually, they rolled out something called Moderator. And that's designed, basically it's designed to look at everything from a generative AI standpoint in and out. And then for the in and inputs and outputs, also to have policy assigned to it, right? So just make sure that like whatever your company policies are being adhered to, the input and the output. That could go against either. Also data security, ensuring that it doesn't go to retraining for other models. And then like a series of, essentially tooling. It's like runtime tooling for the space. And, although I think like there's, in some ways you could look at them as jumping on the bandwagon, they've actually been doing some of this already. They've reoriented a little bit. And it seems like the right move because I just had, someone from a giant telecom company on the podcast. It's going to come out next week or the week after. And they don't have tools for this and they need it. And they need to make sure that they can go to market with confidence. And that's really what Calypso is focused on.
Yeah. And I think it's telling what you're saying, that it's not that they weren't involved in the space before, ChatGPT came out, but now they have an entirely new potential market beyond government and into the enterprise space. Because if you watch some of their videos, it's pretty impressive how it essentially acts as an overseer for things like ChatGPT or other models. It's watching not only for mistakes or hallucinations, but if it's going off brand, if it's sharing proprietary information, it's keeping an eye on that and allows a company to use generative AI tools without having to manually check every single message, every single social media post, and going the other direction as well. It's even keeping an eye out for potential use of generative AI as a malicious hacking tool.
Yeah. That seems closer to where they were maybe a year ago, and this, focus on those types of things. It will be interesting to see if they wind up mostly serving government or mostly serving commercial. It seems like what they're talking about right now is much more commercial because government's going to be a longer lead time for a lot of these things. But yeah, I think it's really interesting, and it'll automatically redact phone numbers and other types of private information before it goes out to third parties. So really good stuff. All right, so you did a story on a company called Loora as well, and they raised $9 million this week.
Yeah, it's a space that I think we've seen bits of generative AI in education, but I think this is an early sign of how it's going to become a bigger part of the generative AI market, because it makes a lot of sense, especially for what Loora. So Loora is created essentially a generative AI English tutor, specifically built around audio and conversation and teaching people how to not only understand the language, but to speak it, to adjust their grammar and their accent and so on. And it's leveraging the capacity of things like ChatGPT to converse in a more human way, to build those skills without getting trapped in the sort of gamified system of Duolingo, which is also using generative AI, but has limited it to a sort of role-playing system rather than talking about whatever the user wants to talk about. And speaking again to the enterprise side of things, Loora said that I think 7 out of 10 of all their customers are professionals who want to learn English or improve their English for professional reasons. So I think, again, businesses finding new ways to apply generative AI to enhance what they do, even if it's in direct ways like language skills.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and actually, we didn't show it, but the Bloomberg intelligence market forecast, breaks out education is one of the key sectors, and that's going to have tremendous growth. In fact, I mean, if you just step back and look at it, you can see, oh, the contact center and creation of content, all these other types of things. One of the things we saw at Synthedia this week was Willow Tree demonstrated basically an AI ChatGPT type coach for medical students. And it basically created this persona of a certain type of patient, and that patient had a particular problem. And the medical student actually has to ask a bunch of questions during the visit in order to diagnose what the problem is. And so you can start to see all of these types of solutions that are going to be able to come out. And Tobias Dingle, who talked about that, he said, listen, these things sort of existed in the past. It's kind of like choose your own adventure. It's like find the solution. He said, but what would have taken us probably a year to build something, with a team of 5 people, just 12 months ago, was what they can do with 3 or 4 people in 6 weeks now. And so it makes these things so much more accessible, and it's going to have this huge impact.
And it's also worth just pointing out that we've already evolved past the point where a company like Loora has to pick one large language model to go with. They have several that are part of the app, and depending on the topic or the kind of conversation you want to have, it will direct your inquiry or your conversation to the model that it thinks will be able to deal with it best.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so folks, if you joined halfway through here, this is Gain, the Generative AI News Rundown. I'm Brett Kinsella, the founder of Synthedia and VoiceBot.ai, and Eric Schwartz is the head writer of VoiceBot.ai. We gather here every week to talk about the generative AI news of the week, what's happening. And by the way, towards the end, we have winners and losers of the week, which is always kind of fun. Right now we're talking about money. We're going to talk about products next. So a lot more, coming up. If you like this, please just like the video. Share it with somebody. Let people know about it. And I've been trying to put some of the links of the stories in here as well, so people check that out. Okay, so next up we have SlangAI, not Slang Labs. Slang Labs, also a very successful company, but SlangAI. What's going on there?
Yeah, so Slang, they're a company we've been running out for a while, or been keeping an eye on for a while, because they are voice. They grew as a voice AI startup, and they just raised another 20 million, and they're pushing for the restaurant space. They want to make generative AI a phone concierge, essentially, for restaurants, for hotels, for places like that. It's not necessarily a huge amount of money, but they are just coming out of a stealth, essentially, and they have a lot of clients already. Some big names, including the head judge for Top Chef, in fact. But it's just, as we keep saying, there's so many ways that a human-esque conversational AI is useful, and answering the phone is certainly one of them. I mean, we've seen a lot over the years of attempts at this kind of thing. I'm thinking, of course, of Duplex and tools like that. But this is really much more just straightforward. This AI will look at your business. It'll know your information. It'll do the reservations and handle things in a way that doesn't annoy people, like pushing the right buttons at the right time does.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is really interesting because restaurant space is one of the areas that has actually been quite hot. in the conversational AI space, whereas while some other things were cooling off over the last couple of years. And a lot of that's just like there's these secular trends around restaurants not having enough staff to answer the phone, to take orders, to actually serve and keep full staff on, keep it open. So anything they can do to improve efficiency is going to have a big impact. And I guess it's not that surprising to me that like there's room for new startups in the space, but you've reported extensively on this. There are already a lot of providers in this space, including some really large ones like Google.
Yeah, I mean, Google has been testing out bringing its generative AI to a Wendy's drive-through. There's Presto, which is using ChatGPT for its drive-through. I mean, there was a lot of interest in the drive-through space, but I think just basic phone calls and handling reservations is going to be just as important as the drive-through in terms of freeing up humans to do things that the AI can't do.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so next up, a different type of funding story here. This isn't a startup, but Amazon AWS is creating a generative AI innovation center. They're putting $100 million towards it. So what does this mean? It's a $1.3 trillion market. AWS is going to take a big portion of that. I mean, think about those numbers where they're talking about hardware, and then there's another services. A lot of that actually goes through something like Amazon Web Services. But what I think is really going on here is this isn't all of what they're doing. In fact, Amazon's doing a lot more stuff behind the scenes, which is not public yet, which will come out over the next 6 months or so. But they are behind, and I don't think there's any question about that. This innovation center is just a way for them to start to organize around a number of different things. One of which is they recognize, which everybody should understand, is that there's a lot of big organizations that want to deploy large language models, are deploying them, but they don't have experience in it. So they actually don't know what they should be doing, what are the best practices, how to choose a model, how to optimize a model, and things like that. And they're hiring right now. They're bringing people in who have this experience. Most of the people who have this experience work for the big tech companies or for one of the startups that has these obscene valuations, right? Not a lot of them are actually in these enterprises. Not a lot of them are actually in the big consultancies right now either. So there's this gap, and Amazon just wants people to deploy models sooner, use models more often, because that's how they make money in the compute in AWS. So they're going to provide some of these services. They're hiring people to help onboard big operations, but they're also creating an ecosystem. And there are going to be a lot of providers. So if you're a provider of software and services that helps people run their AI, their generative AI stack, you should be talking to Amazon Web Services right now and trying to get part of that, because they will give you customers. And particularly early on. Once it gets mature a year from now, who knows? It's like it all becomes self-service at that point. But that's what they're doing. This is the key barrier right now, is people are figuring out, there's enthusiasm here, but there's not enough know-how and capability to move as fast as the enthusiasm could take the market.
Yeah, I mean, Amazon has all of these experts who understand just what this technology could do for so many businesses that use AWS. But step one is having the businesses understand what it can do and wanting them to look for it. So it's a prestigious way of disguising essentially a beginner's school almost for what this technology can do. And $100 million is obviously a lot of money in general, but in terms of what AWS brings in now and what it might expect to bring from those charts we were looking at earlier, this could be just a little fertilizing the ground for a lot of potential future growth.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so another money fountain story, which is not a startup funding, but this is could go into that. You wrote a story here about the UK putting a significant amount of money towards generative AI.
Yeah, this is one of those interesting the overlap of the technology development and the policy and politics side of it, especially in the UK, which has been very, very loud about wanting to be the center of specifically generative AI policy, and which has been pushing for innovation, especially when it comes to health tech. So yeah, they're putting the government's putting $27 million into their National Health Service, specifically to bring generative AI tools to the hospitals, because it's a National Health Service, so it's all funded and operated centrally at some level. So they want to see what local companies can make. They want to see which of the tech partners that hospitals already work with can come out with new products, and they're really trying to push this idea that AI can help reduce the amount of pressure and the amount of time that medical professionals have to spend on non-medical professional things. Although, as I note in that article, they've attempted something similar before and it did not go well. So they're being a little more cautious this time.
Yeah, I think this is interesting too, because a lot of folks look at generative AI and there's two things they know about it. Well, it's kind of amazing at some of the things that it does, but it also is wrong. When you talk about money or health, there are all sorts of different standards for what is acceptable. And so a lot of people thought that healthcare might be one of the last places generative AI sort of makes a stand, makes progress. It's going to go everywhere else first. We had Bill Rogers from Orbita at the Synthedia 3 event just 2 days ago. He's already doing projects in the space for healthcare providers, for hospitals, for pharmaceutical companies, using these tools, because it's not just like using the tool, it's actually how you're using the tools. And there are ways to use it so that you actually fall into that compliance, that you do make sure that it's only truthful information that's coming out. And by the way, you get those productivity benefits, which we need probably in healthcare as much or more than any other sector.
Yeah, and it also, I mean, it is worth noting, especially, and I mean, Orbita was a big part of this, that the sort of conservative attitude toward new technology that a lot of the health sector had was shattered by the pandemic and the need for conversational AI in general, with chatbots and voice AI, and suddenly adoption rates soared. And this is very much building on that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so another interesting thing, we're seeing this just across industries. I mean, they're committing money. They're not just talking about it. And when you look at this, like, is 27 million a lot for something as large as the NHS? It's a lot for the first step. That's what I would say. So it's not like they just funded like a $500,000 or $2 million POC, right? 27 million, they can actually do a lot with. And so we'll see how that plays out over time. All right, so next story I want to bring up, let's get into products. Because one of the things that we like to talk about is we like to talk about products which are generative AI specific, but also a lot of existing software products in the market are adding generative AI because it adds to the features. And I have one here from Oracle as well. And so Oracle has a giant, HR solution. Think of this as back office, ERP, that type of thing. Oracle had one for a long time. PeopleSoft, it's all Oracle now. But they've put together a few different features that are going to help people. So assisted authoring, so it'll help you write things like job descriptions, things like that. It could be performance reviews. They'll give you suggestions on how to do better with or deploy your solutions more effectively. And summarization, like maybe the killer app for summarization shows up everywhere. But there's a lot of things, whether it be from a human resources standpoint, whether it be you have to create something or you have to summarize information for an employee. There's a lot of opportunities for this, and we've seen something from Veritone, from one of their subsidiaries, had something out like this about 6 months ago. This seems logical. Yeah,
and it fits with the kind of broad spectrum approach to technology that Oracle's had. I mean, speaking of health before, I mean, they bought Cerner, which had been working on combining AI with electronic health records. So, I mean, they're very interested in seeing how they can improve efficiency using AI, including generative AI. And I think they're going to test a lot of things. And even if only a couple of them show promise, then those ones that show promise will show up everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so here's another thing. You were telling me about this. I don't know that your story is published on this yet. Maybe it has.
Not quite.
But Adobe is going to cover everybody's copyright, or excuse me, lawsuits related to copyright if they use Firefly. So just like break this down for us.
Yes. So, I mean, Adobe's been very keen to get people to try out its generative AI portfolio called Firefly, which includes images and video and all these new and impressive tools for making art and films. But one of the things that they were really pushing, that they really talked about early on, is that they wanted to make sure that all the data they were using was data they were allowed to use, that it was either public domain or images and video that they had a right to license. And so they're so confident of that as a way of making their customers feel safer about using the technology, that they say that if any of them are sued for a copyright breach because of something related to Firefly, that they'll cover it. They'll take care of those legal costs and all of that headache, because they're 100% certain that they're not violating any of those laws. So
Absolutely.
whether that invites the lawsuits is a different question.
Well, and I think this is the issue, right? So it's really smart. What's happening now is a lot of people are saying, okay, I want to move forward, but what are the potential problems? And so then these are what you would call in sales objections, right? So they object. They're like, yeah, I'd like to do this, but I'd like to do that, but. And this is where people are saying, okay, I just did a POC or I played around with it, but like production, what could go wrong? And in this case, lawsuits are a big deal. Like there's a lot of very large brands here. If you could see class action lawsuits, you could see all these other things. The one thing I wonder is if this will actually invite litigation. If someone knows that Adobe is just going to indemnify everybody, they might just be like, oh, I'm just going to like put these things out everywhere where I see people are using Firefly, just assuming that Adobe just will want the problem to go away and will start paying them off.
There's a possibility for that, but if I had to guess, I mean, I haven't seen all of the fine print, but I'm guessing that it's going to be restricted to states that have strong anti-SLAPP laws that are good about stopping frivolous lawsuits, and are not going to end up in these sort of nightmare realms of patent trolls that have caused so many problems for tech entrepreneurs over the years.
Okay. All right. So we have another story that you did this week. So this is a generative AI native software company, Inflection AI, known for Pi. What's going on there?
Yeah, Inflection's an interesting company because they were working on essentially a generative AI chatbot before ChatGPT came out, and nobody really knew what they were working on, but they had some big names behind it, and they came out with this little AI called Pi. But as we were, again, talking about early on, the demand right now is for the models more than any of the specific apps or products. So they've now turned the large language model behind Pi into an API that other business can use. So a rival for OpenAI, for Google or Meta. And they're trying to muscle in on the sort of behind the scenes generative AI space rather than just the consumer facing product.
It's really interesting. Everybody wants to do that. I'm surprised, kind of, because there's not that many people who are doing like this sort of personal chat assistant. And I saw someone on the Collision stage yesterday, big conference out of Toronto, in the media space, and saying, hey, it's kind of amazing. She was sort of 50-50 on whether she liked it or not, but it was kind of interesting that it personalized very quickly, and was like the following day was asking her follow-ups and things like that. And I think there's a market for that hasn't really been cracked yet. Because ChatGPT is not personalized, right? This is like you're one of a million. They might remember your previous threads, but it's not really personalized. But I guess, everybody's going to seek the big corporate dollars because that's what's leading right now in terms of adoption.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen, and you've been covering the interest in, especially in the mental health space for conversational AI as a therapy tool in some ways for years. And so a generative AI chatbot that is focused on the idea of emotional intelligence makes a lot of sense. But I think there's where the market is now, and there's where the market's going to be. And I think that, right now APIs for LLMs are going to be what people are looking for. And Inflection has one that's not related to Microsoft or Google, so they have something to offer.
Absolutely. Okay, enough on that. Another story that you had, which was interesting. So a little bit of cultural zeitgeist here. Marvel, fairly big or well-known brand in the media space. What's going on?
Yes, so Marvel and Disney have a new TV show called Secret Wars that is all about aliens disguised themselves as humans. And for the credits, they one of the visual effects companies working with Marvel used generative AI art to design the pictures that people are seeing, and it immediately generated a lot of outrage among artists and among creative professionals in general, because of the legitimate concern about, oh, is this taking away something from jobs from real artists? Oh, is this stealing from artists who are not getting credit and money that they should be getting? In this specific instance, it seems like no, this is just a visual effects company that they weren't doing this, they would have something that is pretty similar and would not involve hiring any artists. But the larger concern is definitely valid, and the fact that it's Marvel, that it's Disney, puts this puts the controversy and the technology, frankly, right at the center of mainstream American experiences. I mean, there's no bigger audience than Marvel's audience. So now, even if people had been ignoring the discussion in the tech forums, they probably have seen AI art that they may not have noticed otherwise.
Well, another place that sort of popular culture this has crept up is you did a story, I think, on Wimbledon as well.
Yes. Yeah. This has been creeping up in the background of pop culture and I guess the idea of commentating using AI has been something that IBM has been really pushing forward. They made an AI assistant for a TV show at one point. They were using their AI, Watson AI, as a Grammys host, and now just one of the official Wimbledon commentators will be generative AI based. Not for like the actual games themselves, but for the extra content, for the highlights and so on. And they're working with the All England Club behind Wimbledon. So it's just an aspect of sports, of pop culture now, in a way that would have been hard to predict not that long ago, but now is just going to be, I think, present in everything that people experience in some form.
Interestingly enough, Veritone demoed something similar to this in October of last year, pre-Chat GPT. And what they can do is they actually will take information feeds from the live broadcast. They process it. They actually change the rendering on a screen in terms of where things are if they're not doing a video broadcast. But it'll actually generate a script based on what's happening, and they have synthetic voices, so they can speak it, so you can read or you can listen. Interestingly enough, that solution will present the information before the live TV broadcast, because the TV broadcasts have delays. Yep. So they can actually push that out online. So if you're following something, you can actually be a few seconds ahead of the game. So this is something that I expect to see more of for things that, are basically just hard to do, because every time you put a human in the loop and they have to get real-time data and they have to analyze it and they have to comment on it and those types of things, it takes away from what they could also be doing, or, you might not have enough staff to do that. So I think this is going to be like an augmentation, whether it's they're just producing scripts for the on-air talent to read, or it's going to generate their own voice and you're just going to be like, okay, Watson says. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. Now, one last story that I wanted to hit on. You also did a story about Josh AI. They are a high-end smart home device maker, kind of think like Alexa, but for like really high-end homes. Yeah. So they added ChatGPT.
They're very much aimed at the rich people whose homes are already pretty advanced in a lot of ways, but who can also then afford to have their own central server to run their smart home, so that they never have to send data to the cloud. But they're almost, I'm sure they were getting plenty of inquiries from their clients, and now they've essentially made their version of Google Assistant, of Alexa, as a generative AI chatbot, so Josh GPT using an OpenAI model will now basically make the voice assistant that runs your home as capable of talking about anything as talking to ChatGPT. So it's again this idea that the generative AI models don't have to be limited to text. They don't have to be limited to a screen. They can be pretty much in anything. And OpenAI is well ahead of the game when it comes to those APIs.
Yeah, and in fact, I think it's interesting because someone like Josh comes out and they're competing against Amazon and Google for space in the home, and they basically carve out this niche for these high-end properties. And now they actually have something that gives them capabilities that those tools don't have, and so that's interesting. So they have the old do engine, so like control my smart home, right? So they already have something that does that. But then if you looked at Alexa and Google, they had all these other features and skills and things like that. ChatGPT sort of fills in that. So I think it's really interesting that how quickly that market, could shift based on this.
Yeah, and I would say it brings home that dream of the Tony Stark voice assistant that can respond to sarcasm and do multiple things at once. Is now much closer to reality with this kind of technology.
Absolutely, and Tony Stark's house is the type of house that Josh AI would implement your stuff into. So it's a really good example. Okay, hey folks, this is Gain, the Generative AI News Rundown. We're going to do winners and losers of the week in the generative AI world in just a moment, but we're here every week. Try to come at 11 a.m. on LinkedIn when it works. Apparently it's not working today, but on YouTube Live as well, it seems to be working. And you can watch these afterwards just on the YouTube channel. So definitely go there if you are not, but most of you are probably watching this on YouTube afterwards. But these are all recorded, so you can watch it on our YouTube channel afterwards. I want to let you know that. The other thing I want to tell people about, let's see here. I'm presenting at a conference in London in a few weeks, Unparsed. You guys go check this out. Let's see I'll put the URL in here as well. It's Unparsed Conf, SCONF, so short for conference.com. And it is all about conversation design. So a lot of people are really interested in that, from generative AI, from conversational AI. And I think you'll like it. We're going to present some data around the change in conversational AI brought on by large language models, and how the conversation designer role is changing. Conversation design itself is changing, but there's like so many amazing speakers there. Lisa Falkson from Amazon's going to be there. Karen Krashansky from Google, Hans van Dam from the Conversation Design Institute. It's really going to be a good setup. So they have an online version as well. And if you use VoiceBot, as you put that in as the code, they're actually giving away 2-for-1s. So to attend online, it's like it's not very expensive. It's like de minimis. To attend in person, it's actually very cheap. I think it's only $250 for a 2-day conference with food. So if you're going to be in London, or you think you might like to head over there, definitely sign up. Let me know. Use that code VoiceBot. I'll put that in here. That's in the chat now as well, so that people can see the code for Unparsed Conference. Okay, great. So winners and losers, Eric.
I guess
what do you want to do first, losers or winners?
I'll start with winner, I think, just because I have one in mind, and it's related to what we were talking about before. But I'm going to say Britain, because not only is the government investing heavily in bringing generative AI to the NHS, but OpenAI announced that they're going to open their first international office in London. So their dreams of being a hub for AI are just got a lot more realistic.
Absolutely, yeah, that's really interesting. Someone was just mentioning, like, when's the Toronto office coming for OpenAI? All right, so I'll say a winner is MosaicML, 3 years to 1.3 billion. And interestingly enough, a little factoid that we didn't bring up during our conversation about that is I think Databricks only did a billion in revenue last year. So they did $1 billion in revenue last year. They're buying MosaicML, a 3-year-old company, for $1.3 billion. Think about that. And in terms of what people see in terms of the future of this industry, but also congrats to the folks over at Mosaic for building something that obviously has a lot of value. Okay, who's your loser?
It was a tough one. I think I'm going to have to say, I mean, going back to governments, but the Israeli government is having to answer some questions about how much of the military and intelligence services are relying on generative AI, and the question of how much they can trust national security to a still relatively young technology is definitely causing some headaches for, I think, the legislative liaisons for those defense groups.
Yeah, it's really interesting because we saw a couple stories. We didn't get to it this week to cover. I thought maybe we'll do it in the future as we see it play out. But you know, it's interesting. Why would the Israeli Shin Bet, their security services, or the IDF, the defense services, why would this even be like a conversation that's going out there? But part of it too is I think that there's an interest. Israel exports security to the world. That's like a big thing. Like the government actually provides like services and software to people, in addition to all the different companies and things like that that are around it. But that's like a big part of their diplomacy, you know, as well as part of their GDP. And so it's very interesting that's coming out. It's like, oh, by the way, if you want generative AI for these things, this is also something we can provide. But yeah, this will be very interesting. I'll say for my loser of the week, it's BingChat. It's Microsoft. I think they need to do some work really quickly on BingChat. And if they really are serious about trying to get market share from Google, they need to make this available on other browsers immediately, and they need to bring that latency way, way down. And I also see, like, if you use BingChat, like they're starting to serve ads now, and I think in some cases the quality's gone down. And Bing through ChatGPT is okay, but it's actually the latency is 3 times longer. It's like insane. So I think they have a lot of work to do. They've had a really good debut, but they could fritter it all away if they just give up on, you know, providing sort of a substandard experience from a latency and wait time standpoint.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's it. Thanks everybody for joining us this week. A lot going on in generative AI land as usual. I'm Brett Kinsella. Follow me on the Twitter at Brett Kinsella, Eric H. Schwartz. You can find him on Twitter there, but you know, connect with us on LinkedIn. And I hope you come back next week. We're going to start doing this at 11 a.m. each week. We're going to do that for a little while. And you know, let us know what you think. Go down to the comments, you know, like and subscribe, but tell us what you thought about today, what you thought your winners and losers were, those types of things. I definitely appreciate everyone coming out today. Bye-bye.
Bye.